Coleman General Contracting is a full-service general contracting company founded in 2010, dedicated to meeting both the client's service and product needs in home and commercial renovations. The company is a limited liability corporation, or LLC, located in Ridley Park, Pennsylvania. While their current focus is on custom kitchens, bathrooms, and fine cabinetry, they also do other residential and commercial renovations based on their clients' needs. I spoke recently with founder and owner Paul Coleman about his entrepreneurial experiences and will share parts of my interview here in this webinar. To put this conversation into context, my husband and I are planning on using Coleman General Contracting to fully renovate the front and back of house when we open up our Philly Foodie Eats restaurant in Center City, Philadelphia. I learned from speaking with Paul that throughout his life, he's always found ways to make money running his own businesses. As a child, he can remember making flyers, photocopying them at the library, and passing them around his neighborhood for things like lawn care and snow shoveling, the usual neighborhood kid stuff. In high school, he met a friend who had a similar entrepreneurial spirit, and they managed and eventually inherited a valet parking business for a restaurant nearby. The two of them ran it for about 6 years through college, and Paul says that was probably his first taste of running his own business. When it came time for college, Paul went to school to study engineering, but realized after 2 years that it wasn't right for him. He couldn't imagine only doing that for the rest of his life, and so he switched his major to finance. Part of him knew that wherever his path would take him, finance would be applicable to all industries and trades. After college, he started a business called Home Technology Partners, a company that installed home automation and home theater systems for the production level high-end builders in the area. This was going great, but not long after starting that venture, Paul got an offer to help start a real estate investing company with the same guy who he had run the valet parking business with years before. This fellow had, in the years leading up to this, worked as a CFO for a business that serviced the gaming industry. This was in 2005, the market was hot, and he was a really smart individual who was super driven. They had investments with 2 other partners, and the 4 of them saw great financial gain over the course of their 3 years together. But that business dissolved, and they went their separate ways. It was at that time, around 2009, that Paul realized how much he liked the construction portion of the real estate investing business and decided to pursue that full time. We can see that it took Paul some time to figure out exactly what he wanted to do, but he knew that having the freedoms involved with running his own business, combined with his love for working with his hands and financial management ability, was finally the right path to pursue. After making some good decisions and good investments with those 3 former partners, Paul had a bunch of money saved, and he says he really just wanted to see if he could even make his contracting service a full-time business. He started Coleman General Contracting as a sole proprietor, although he has recently retained a partner through merging 2 existing businesses. This came about in 2017 when Paul had a conversation with the man, an older gentleman whose cabinet business was in its twilight stages, who he had been buying cabinets from for years. Paul asked if he had any plans for the future of his company, and since his retirement was right around the corner, one thing led to another, and they merged their companies into one. They still operate separately to a degree, but all of the revenue profit is essentially divided between both partners at this point. In the 3 years that they've been partners, they've grown the combined revenue for both companies about $900,000. Paul says that putting the company together long before the partnership developed was the easy part. Filling out the right paperwork with the government, filing it, getting insurance set up was no problem for him. It wasn't until he started dealing with the people involved in the business that he hit his first roadblocks. Paul is, admittedly, a perfectionist. Here he is, starting his own business, one heavily rooted in craftsmanship, and all of the people he had worked with in the past through the real estate investments and home theater installations had been doing pretty shoddy work. Up until this point, he had been dealing with subcontractors who were doing fast and inferior work. Paul wasn't interested in that type of stuff. He wanted to produce something Nice, nothing but quality, and so he ended up doing a lot of things himself and learning on the job. Paul says, quote, I know that's not really the path to financial success, but it built a solid foundation to work from. Also, when I first started out and would hire subs, I would be hesitant to ask why they were doing something a certain way, and then when they messed it up or didn't really grasp my vision, I'd get super frustrated. Now it doesn't bother me one bit. I'll ask my most trusted subs a million times, not because I'm worried about the quality of their work, but because they might not always see what the end result I have planned is. End quote. Another point of frustration in the beginning for Paul, and one that he says will always be there, is the dwindling size of the qualified labor pool. He says he doesn't mind if someone doesn't have years of experience. He's happy to take on a person who is eager to learn and add them as an apprentice and work them up into a master carpenter. However, most of the people that have the intelligence and drive for this end up going to college and want to be something better than just a tradesman. Paul's company is unique because he provides a service and the goods and products as a result of his customer consultations and further relationships. Because he has high quality expectations from all of his employees, he makes sure that he only hires or subcontracts the best tradespeople. He says that every person he employs is a reflection of his company, and he makes sure that they know that. He leads by example and stresses that the customer is paramount in all they do. Paul says, quote, it starts with basic grooming and dressing. It carries over to respect for the customer's house and their belongings. This includes keeping the job site and the rest of the house clean while we work. I tell both my customers and employees that I am in this not to add jobs, but relationships. It's important that I sort of empower all of the people that work for me in a way, because sometimes I'm not at the job when the customer has a request. And if my employees have to constantly come to me for everything, then that's not giving the customer the best experience. So yes, I'd say everyone in the company is involved on some level, although most of the interaction with the client is my responsibility. End quote. Another aspect worth mentioning is that Paul has not only groomed his employees and subcontractors, but also the suppliers that he deals with, like the vendors he uses to source tile, plumbing fixtures, granite, carpet, etc. He says that those salespeople are a big part of the process, and so they also need to be reflective of how he runs his business. He admits that this didn't happen overnight, and that he will usually only try a new salesperson and or vendor out on a close friend or on a project of his own. I asked Paul if he's still actively involved with the day-to-day working elements of the company and to tell me a little bit about a typical workday. He responded, quote, yes, I still go to the job every day. I typically arrive at my shop around 6:45 and sit at my desk for a half hour to plan my day while the guys get loaded up. I'll then go to work until 3:30 or 4, depending on the day, and then come back to the office and do paperwork until around 5:30. I do take meetings during the day for current and new jobs. I will also take night and or weekend meetings as well. I typically don't work in a client's home on weekends, and I guess at this point I'm probably about 75% delivering the project and 25% managing the business and the customers. End quote. Paul tells me that he's not that creative, but I tend to disagree. Over the course of his career, he's made creative decisions that have allowed not only his skill sets to grow, but also have helped his company to grow. He says, quote, I really do have an appreciation for great design. I'm constantly following trends and looking at other people's work. What I am really good at is taking an inspiration and making it fit that customer's situation. I also have at my disposal an in-house kitchen designer, a slew of tile and stone salespeople, a great plumbing fixture showroom, etc. I am also really good at adding things like different millwork, door styles, and other details that maybe people that don't hire a designer wouldn't necessarily think about, but that really make the project pop. I do know what looks great and what doesn't. So while I don't always know what the path to making it perfect is, I know when we're not there and how to get the right people to help us find the way. End quote. There is no way around it. He runs a company that is reliant on collaboration. collaboration with clients, with vendors, with subcontractors, and other specialists whose expertise can add value to a project. I asked Paul about his competition, and he said, quote, "It's funny. I don't really look at anyone as my competition. I very rarely bid against other people. That's the beauty of having a good reputation and plenty of referral sources. My customers are not on Angie's List or any of these find a contractor websites. They have seen my work and want me for their project. It didn't happen overnight, but it is a good place to be in." End quote. He's doing what he loves, he's the boss, and things are going really well for the company now. So I asked Paul where he sees himself and Coleman General Contracting in 5 years. He says he really has no plans to expand the contracting portion of the business, and he wants to slowly work himself out of the hands-on portion of the company. He says that all of the growth he wants to pursue will be in the cabinet sales portion of the business. He sees his partner retiring in 5 years, and at that point, he can't be in the field every day like he is now. He says, quote, "By then I can see one of my employees in my current role as a working project manager. Hopefully at that point, we have 1 or 2 more young people in the pipeline, learning the trade and on their way to becoming mechanics and master carpenters themselves." The main reason I'm focusing on growth with the cabinet sales is that it takes little outlay in capital for me to grow that portion of the business. My designer has multiple responsibilities that can easily be offloaded to an admin type of position as we increase the sales numbers. In the contracting portion, you have to constantly hire people to grow the business, and there's lots of money and other problems associated with that. Right now, we are essentially picking the right jobs and the right clients that make sense for us. End quote. All in all, Paul has done an incredible job of growing his client base over the course of the last 10 years. He provides excellent products and services in a niche home renovation market in the Delaware Valley. Coleman General Contracting is still in the growth phase and will likely hit maturity in another 10 years, once he can complete the merge and take over his existing partner's share and role within the company.